Good morning. Act two of the play begins with another prologue, kind of like if you remember, the play Act one began with the two households, both alike in dignity in fair Verona, where we set our scene, which was a sonnet. So Act two also begins with a prologue sonnet. This time it's spoken by something called the chorus, which is an idea that Shakespeare got from ancient Greek theater. Typically, in ancient Greek theater, the chorus was 12 citizens who commented on the action of the play to help, basically to help the people watching understand. And in ancient Greek theater, that had evolved from a chorus that, like in music, literally sang. But by the time Shakespeare picks up this tradition, it's not necessarily sung, but it's still a technique that playwrights use to communicate basically the citizens' reaction to the action. So this prologue, which is spoken by the chorus, a group of people, is also a sonnet. It's 14 lines, has an A, B, C, D, E, F, G rhyme scheme, iambic pentameter. So I'm going to read it, and then I'm going to go back through and unpack it a little and annotate a few things. So the last thing that happened in Act 1, Romeo and Juliet met. They had the shared sonnet that you analyzed. They said goodbye, and then they each found out that the other was a member of the enemy household. So at the beginning of Act 2, the chorus summarizes the action. Now, old desire doth in his deathbed lie, and young affection gapes to be his heir. That fair for which love groaned for and would die, with tender Juliet matched, is now not fair. So let's just look at that first quatrain, first set of 4 lines. There's a important thing here. Now, old desire doth in his deathbed lie. Old desire is personified. We have a personification. The old desire was Romeo's feelings for Rosaline. And what we find out is that those feelings are dead. And young affection gapes to be his heir. So the heir to the one who inherits old desire is young affection. This is Juliet. She's the young affection. Remember, she's not even 14 yet. So she's the one who inherits Romeo's affection, his desire. That fair for which love groaned for and would die, with tender Juliet matched, is now not fair. So what we have here is the acknowledgement that the fair for which love groaned for, that's Rosaline. Rosaline's the fair. The fair that which love groaned for, love would be Romeo. And would die. So it's basically saying that woman, Rosaline, who Romeo would groan for and would die for, now that he's matched with tender Juliet, is now not fair. So basically saying Rosaline is no longer appealing to Romeo because he's found Juliet appealing because of Juliet. Stark contradiction to what Romeo himself said to Benvolio. I think he said something like he'd sooner gouge his eyes out or something to that effect. So now, all right, so in the next stanza, so this is our first stanza, basically saying all the affection for Rosaline is gone, and it's now transferred to Juliet. Now Romeo is beloved and loved and loves again. Sounds good. Alike bewitched by the charm of looks. But to his supposed foe he must complain, and she still loves bait from fearful hooks. So here's our next stanza. To his supposed foe, or to his foe supposed he must complain. The foe is Capulet. So basically saying Romeo's beloved and loved again, but he must seek Capulet's approval. And she must steal love's sweet bait from fearful hooks. This is a metaphor. To steal bait from a hook sort of makes her like a fish, right? So she's got to get the bait, which is love. This is Juliet as a fish trying to get bait, which is metaphorically love, without being hooked from fearful hooks. So she must steal love's sweet bait from fearful hooks. Why? What does this mean? Well, it relates to the same thing as the line before, in the sense that love's the fearful aspect of the hook of love here is because Romeo's a Montague, so that makes it fearful. But there's also a little bit of an implication here that, you know, of that dynamic that we saw in the shared sonnet, where Romeo's kind of like pushing aggressively, you know, to touch her, to hold her hand, to kiss her. You know, he's making a sexual advance on her, and she's kind of you know, trying to show her interest in him, but also push him back and slow him down a little. So on the one hand, I think on the surface, it's just a metaphor that says, you know, she's got to get love without being hooked, without being hurt, because he's a Montague. The fearful hook is their, you know, this ancient grudge. But maybe on a more intimate level, and closer and dearer to like Juliet's character, is this idea that she needs to steal love's sweet bait, meaning, you know, the connection, the goodness, the joy of love, from the fearful hooks of like aggressive sexual advances that Romeo makes. That's sort of a part of their relationship from the very get-go, that he's kind of pushing hard for a physical relationship, and she's trying to build an emotional relationship before that happens. So then now we have the third quatrain. Being held a foe, he may not have access to breathe such vows as lovers use to swear. Okay, that one's fairly straightforward. Because he's a foe, he's an enemy, he might not have access to breathe such vows as lovers use to swear. Access just means he won't be able to tell her he loves her. And in fact, the next scene, we're going to see the great lengths he has to go through just to be able to talk to her. Won't be able to tell her he loves her. Because he can't just like knock on her front door and say, hey, is Juliet home? And she, as much in love, her means much less to meet her new beloved anywhere. This is where we start to get a recognition of the difference between men and women in this play in terms of their social position. She's as much in love as Romeo, but her means are less. She's less able to meet her new beloved anywhere because she's a young girl. She's a young teenage girl. And basically what we're finding out here is that she's not able to go out of the house without an escort, unescorted. we see Romeo wandering in orchards. We see him going around with his friends. That's because he's a teenage boy. Juliet, being a teenage girl, is not granted the same freedom in this society. So there's this, there's a recognition here that's the case. And perhaps you could argue that Shakespeare is, especially by showing us how, and you'll see this more in scene 2, how thoughtful and capable, we saw it in the shared sonnet, how intelligent Juliet is, how quick-witted she is. It's sort of ironic that she's the one who's not allowed to go out on her own, whereas Romeo, who we see is kind of like impetuous and quick to change his emotions in how quickly he turned from Rosaline to Juliet, he's free to do whatever he wants. Of course, he can't just knock on the Capulets' door, but he can pretty much go anywhere he wants in society. But Juliet is acknowledged here that she can't do that. So this sonnet, remember the problem solution, the sonnet is giving us a problem that, okay, although love has been, although they both found love, the problem is the grudge between the two families. It's the feud. Romeo's beloved and loved again, alike bewitched by the charm of looks, but to his foe supposed he must complain, and she must steal love's sweet bait from fearful hooks. So, being held a foe, he can't have access, and she, because she's a woman, and also because he's a foe, can't meet him anywhere. So we have a problem. Problem is the grudge. We could say larger. The problem is, how will they find each other? Problem is, how will they be able to be in love? It's one thing to say that they're in love, but how can they actually have that in their life? So what do we get in the final 2 lines of a sonnet, of a Shakespearean sonnet? We get a couplet, and that should provide us some sort of solution. But passion lends them power. Time means to meet, tempering extremities with extreme sweet. Meet, sweet, there's our rhyming couplet. But passion lends them power. So the strength of their emotion, the passion, strength of emotion, lends them power. Time gives them the means to meet. Tempering extremities in this case, tempering means like cooling extremities, and the extremity in this case is the feud or the anger or the violence between the families. Tempering extremities with extreme sweet, and of course the extreme sweet here is love. So what's our solution? Oops, sorry, I can't spell. Solution. So problem is, how are they going to be together? Solution is, their passion will find a way to overcome the feud, or to allow them to find love. Their passion will allow them to find their love. Okay. Of course, it may not be enough, but it will be enough to bring them together. And so Act 1, Scene 2 is going to show us how that passion is able to bring them together, how Romeo is able to overcome the problem of not having access, and how Juliet, not being as free as Romeo to move around Verona, will overcome that problem in order to secure their love.